In 2026, this team, the Blue Sharks of Cape Verde, pulled off the impossible. A tiny nation of just over 500,000 people went undefeated in the World Cup group stages. But what if I told you that incredible sporting story isn't even the most unbelievable thing this country has ever done? To really get how they shocked the world on the football pitch, you first have to understand how they built a thriving nation on islands once sentenced to death by geography. To get the miracle of modern Cape Verde, you have to go back to its birth in 1975. After centuries of Portuguese colonial rule, this new nation was born into a world that had already written it off. The islands had almost nothing: no oil, no precious minerals, barely any fertile land for farming. They were, and still are, 10 volcanic islands in the middle of the Atlantic, battered by relentless droughts that caused devastating famines for centuries. The situation was so grim, the story goes that a top American official flatly declared the nation unviable at independence. The challenges just seemed insurmountable. It was one of the poorest countries on the planet, and its destiny, it seemed, was to be a cautionary tale, a nation forever dependent on foreign aid, forever trapped by its harsh environment. The standard playbook for how to grow an economy just didn't apply. How do you build a country out of thin air? How does a nation with no resources, no powerful neighbors, and no strategic assets even begin to compete? Well, Cape Verde didn't follow the playbook. It wrote a brand new one, and the first chapter wasn't written on the islands themselves, but thousands of miles away. The secret to Cape Verde's success wasn't buried in the ground. It was walking the streets of cities in America, Portugal, the Netherlands, and France. For centuries, those same droughts and hardships that made life so tough had forced Cape Verdeans to leave. This created a massive global diaspora. Today, it's estimated that more Cape Verdeans and their descendants live abroad than on the islands themselves. This wasn't a brain drain. It was the accidental creation of a global economic engine. This was the first piece of the puzzle, leveraging the diaspora. Money sent home by Cape Verdeans abroad, called remittances, became the economy's lifeblood. These funds consistently make up around 10 to 15% of the nation's entire GDP every year, a steady flow of cash that doesn't depend on commodity prices, but on family and a national identity that crosses oceans. The second piece was stable governance. While many new nations were rocked by coups and instability, Cape Verde built one of Africa's most stable democracies. That stability created the trust needed for the next pillar, tourism. The government made a strategic bet that the very things that once made the islands inhospitable, the volcanic landscapes, the endless sun, the remote location, could be turned into assets. They built infrastructure, opened the doors to foreign investment, and by the mid-2020s, the country was attracting huge numbers of tourists annually, far more than its own population. The fourth pillar was a bold, calculated risk, pegging their currency, the escudo, to the euro. For a small economy, this is incredibly risky because it means you can't devalue your currency in a crisis. But thanks to the constant flow of euros from remittances and tourism, Cape Verde had the reserves to make it work. This move eliminated risk for foreign investors and supercharged the tourism boom. The result was an economic miracle. From the 1990s through the 2000s, the economy grew at an average of over 6% a year, leaving the continental average in the dust. Then, in December 2007, Cape Verde did something remarkable. It officially graduated from the United Nations list of least developed countries to become a middle-income nation, only the second country in history, after Botswana, to ever pull that off. The country once dismissed as unviable hadn't just survived, it was thriving. Its people had built one of West Africa's most prosperous nations, not on oil or gold, but on stability, service, and the unbreakable bonds of its global family. While economists were marveling at Cape Verde's development, a parallel story was unfolding on the football pitch, and it was built on the exact same foundation. For decades, the national team, the Tubarões Azuis, or Blue Sharks, was a nobody in African football. How could a nation of 500,000 possibly compete with giants like Cameroon or Nigeria? The answer, once again, was the diaspora. The Cape Verdean Football Federation made a game-changing decision. They would build their team not just with players on the islands, but with the global Cape Verdean community. They started actively scouting and recruiting players born and raised in Portugal, the Netherlands, France, and the United States. Young men who felt a connection to their ancestral homeland. Suddenly, That small population wasn't a disadvantage anymore. It was a strategic asset. The national team became a mirror of the nation itself, a blend of homegrown talent and global citizens, united by a single flag. Over half the squad that would eventually make history came from this diaspora. The results were transformative. In 2013, the Blue Sharks qualified for their first ever Africa Cup of Nations and stunned the continent by reaching the quarterfinals. But that was just the warm-up. In October 2025, they did the unthinkable. In a brutal qualifying group that included African powerhouse Cameroon, little Cape Verde finished on top, punching their ticket to the 2026 FIFA World Cup. They became one of the smallest nations by population ever to reach football's greatest stage. The economic miracle now had its ultimate symbol. When the draw for the 2026 World Cup was made, nobody gave them a prayer. Cape Verde was thrown into a group of death with Spain, Uruguay, and Saudi Arabia. Their first match, Spain. Pundits predicted a slaughter. The result? A stunning 0-0 draw. The Blue Sharks, with their diaspora-powered defense, were organized, disciplined, and absolutely fearless. Their 40-year-old goalkeeper, Vozinha, became an overnight global sensation, keeping a clean sheet to grab a historic first-ever World Cup point. Next up, Uruguay. Surely, the dream would end here. Commentators insisted they couldn't score. Instead, they fought out a thrilling 2-2 draw, scoring the nation's first-ever World Cup goals. They had proven they could defend. Now they'd proven they could attack. In their final group game, needing just a point against Saudi Arabia, they delivered another masterclass in defensive grit, securing a 0-0 draw that sealed their place in history. Undefeated, they had faced down giants and refused to lose. Cape Verde, the smallest nation to ever do so, was through to the knockout stages. Their reward? A David versus Goliath showdown in Miami against the defending world champions Argentina, led by Lionel Messi. This was it, the ultimate test. What happened next is now legendary. Messi broke the deadlock in the 29th minute, controlling a pinpoint pass before lifting the ball over Vozinha for his 20th career World Cup goal. Cape Verde didn't fold. Just before halftime, in the 58th minute, Leroy Duarte danced through Argentina's defense and finished coolly to level the score at 1-1, a goal that stunned the pro-Argentina crowd in South Florida. That scoreline held all the way through 90 minutes. Extra time. Two of the greatest underdog performances football has ever seen were about to get even more dramatic. In the 92nd minute, Lisandro Martinez restored Argentina's lead with a powerful strike, 2-1, and it looked like the fairy tale was finally over. It wasn't. In the 103rd minute, Sidney Lopes Cabral produced a moment that may stand forever as the greatest goal in Cape Verdean football history. A stunning, curling strike from distance that leveled the match again, 2-2, sending Cabral sprinting into the stands in disbelief at what he'd just done. For a few glorious minutes, the world held its breath. Could the impossible actually happen? Could a nation of 500,000 people really eliminate the defending world champions? It came down to the final 10 minutes. In the 111th minute, Messi swung in a corner. Christian Romero rose above the Cape Verde defense to head it goalward, and the ball deflected in off Cape Verde defender Dini Borges. A cruel, heartbreaking own goal that finally, after 120 unbearable minutes, separated the two sides. Final score, Argentina 3, Cape Verde 2. Argentina, the world champs, survived. Barely. But as the final whistle blew, the stadium roared not just for the winners, but for the team that had lost. The Blue Sharks left the pitch not in defeat, but as heroes who had won the respect of the entire planet. Cape Verde's story is more than just a feel-good sports movie. It's a blueprint. It's proof that where you start doesn't have to be where you finish. It shows that a nation's greatest resource isn't what's under the ground, but the passion and resilience of its people, no matter where on earth they live. The economic miracle and the footballing dream were born from the exact same idea, turning a historic weakness into a modern strength. Forced migration created the diaspora. The diaspora sent home the money that built the economy and the players that built the team. Of course, the story isn't perfect. The nation still faces huge hurdles, high public debt, an economy that relies too heavily on tourism, and a severe vulnerability to climate change are all serious challenges on the horizon. But the story of Cape Verde has never been about avoiding challenges. It has always been about overcoming them. In the boardroom and on the football pitch, this tiny group of islands has shown the world, time and again that you should never, ever count out the underdog. They built a thriving country where none was thought possible, and they went toe-to-toe with the giants of world football and never backed down. The question now is, will that same deep-rooted resilience that built this incredible nation be enough to power its next great chapter? What do you think is the most impressive part of Cape Verde's journey? And which underdog story should we break down next? Let us know in the comments. If you enjoyed this story of how a small nation defied the odds, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next one.